Good morning. Happy Aloha Friday. Today is Friday, March 15, 2024, 9 o'clock a.m. Apologize for the little bit of a delay. Conference room 329 here at the State Capitol, convening our hearing on health and homelessness. Just a few agenda items and some quick housekeeping. We typically take decision-making in this committee at 11:30 a.m., so no need to stick around, but if you'd like to, we will do that. Anyone on Zoom, if we lose you, we will recess the meeting and reconvene. And so if you have any questions, please talk with our fabulous tech folks. So jumping right in, Senate Bill 2529, relating to provider orders for life-sustaining treatment. We have first up, testimony and support from Hawaii Department of Health.
We'll stand on his testimony and support. Thank you, Chair.
Testimony and support, State Health Planning and Development Agency. Via Zoom, Kaiser Permanente.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair Jonathan Ching for Kaiser Permanente. Will stand on our written testimony in support of this really important measure.
Okay, we have testimony in support from HMSA. Thank you. Testimony in support, Hawaii Association of Health Plans. Thank you. Testimony in support, Healthcare Association of Hawaii. Testimony in support from Kokua Mau.
Aloha, my name's Jeanette Kojane. I'm the Executive Director of Kokua Mau, which is a statewide coalition to improve care for people with serious illness. So we stand in support for this bill. I am actually the statewide coordinator for POLST. I serve on the National POLST Committee, and Kokua Mau is the home of POLST. In Hawaii, we see this as our kuleana. I'm very happy to answer any questions. I do want to say there's been strong support from across the healthcare community for this technical change that we think will make things better. So happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your support.
Thank you. We have testimony and support from Hospice Hawaii, Inc., also known as Navion Hawaii. Testimony and support from Hawaii Care Choices. We have testimony and support from a number of individuals, as well as one testimony in opposition. We also have late testimony from Aloha Care. Okay. Members, any other testifiers in the room? Any other testifiers via Zoom? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Questions? Seeing none. Okay, moving on to Public Health Standing Orders, Senate Bill 3122. Governor's Package Bill. We have testimony in person from Dr. Fink, Department of Health.
Happy Aloha Friday and good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Lauren Kim, Policy Chief for the Department of Health. We are in strong support of this admin measure. This is actually something I think that is more than an admin measure. This is a very important bill that we're looking forward to continued negotiations with stakeholders and really, on top of having practical benefits to the everyday patient, this also has, we're looking at this as an opportunity to start a new health policy narrative that is prevention-focused and more patient-centered. Well, actually, I wrote it differently, prevention-centered and patient-focused. And really looking to examine things that are staring us in front of our face that we live with every day that we could tweak. In my testimony, I say, it's great to go after the AHEAD grant or maybe 10 years ago, the large beacon grants, and our community benefits from those, but what are the everyday things that we can do differently given the 20-year evolution in healthcare and health policy? So again, on top of a practical impact, benefit, there is also an opportunity that the department is looking to lead a new health policy conversation after session, and once we kind of have a handle on some of the crises going on. We are open to the amendments that we've been negotiating over the past week. We have a slight concern with assuring that none of the amendments allow us for moving quickly on things that we can move quickly on and for which we have consensus. So with the chair's indulgence, if we could have just a little time for us to huddle with the stakeholders just to get it just right and calibrate it, we would appreciate that opportunity. And this is an important bill, and I have Dr. Fink in the gallery if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Aloha Care comments in person.
Good
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members. Mike Nguyen, Public Policy Manager for Aloha Care. We'll stand on a written testimony. Just thank the department for working with us on language. We support the good public policy that this bill represents and hope that you'll consider the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. We have testimony, comments from HMSA.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Don Kurisu on behalf of HMSA. We stand on our written testimony offering comments, but absolutely support the intent of this wonderful public policy. We also thank the department for talking with all of the stakeholders, and we look forward to continued discussions. Mahalo.
Thank you. Testimony from Hawaii Pacific Health in support. Testimony in support Hawaii Association of Health Plans.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Rachel Wilkinson on behalf of the Hawaii Association of Health Plans. We're standing in support and we're offering some comments. First, we want to thank the Department of Health for their thoughtful discussions, and we really appreciate their collaboration on this bill. We also support the language proposed by the Department of Health to establish a working group, and in addition to a sunset date for the pilot. We are also respectfully requesting consideration of the following proposed amendments. So in Section 2, page 3, after line 18, and then again in Section 2 on page 4, subsection E. And we look forward to working on continuing discussions with the department, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. We have testimony, comments from Hawaii Public Health Institute.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Peggy Mirzo with Hawaii Public Health Institute. We submitted some comments. We just want to say we strongly support the intent of the bill because I think it's wonderful to hear some innovative ideas and people working together. Thank you.
Thank you. We have testimony in support from Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. Testimony in support from Thaddeus Pham, individual, and Beatrice Zovich, an individual. Any other late testimony? Any late testifiers in the room? Any testifiers via Zoom? Seeing none, members, questions? I have a question, and I appreciate that the stakeholders have been working out language. I guess, Mr. Nguyen, maybe since you did the most suggested amendments. And I hear that, I see in HMSA's testimony that they would want us to make the effective date July 1st, 2025. Is that also what you're requesting?
I would defer to HMSA. We're not necessarily requesting a delayed effective date.
Maybe the other way to ask this question is, as it's written, the pilot program, and it would be immediately where the public health standing orders would start to take effect. And so then a patient could go to a pharmacist and immediately start to get it. I understand maybe the need to make the effective date later, but why, what's the realistic time when we could actually get you guys standing up to do this?
I think depending on when the department would put together a working group and develop the implementation of the program, we're open to the effective date.
Maybe I'll ask a question of Department of Health. Right, so Department of Health, your intent was to get this bill up and running so that it could be almost immediately effective, correct? Or am I wrong in that understanding?
In an ideal world, yes. However, having a shared background with some of the stakeholders, we realize this is not something you snap your fingers and it happens overnight. Exactly. So we would have to have a very deliberate, cooperative discussion with the stakeholders. So, although the quote-unquote authority is on our side, the work and expense is going to be on their side. And, we've had discussions, productive discussions about maybe starting with one or two. The USPSTF grade A recommendations are 2.5 pages long, and it's got about 30-something, and that's way too much. There's lots of back-end system change, a ton of communications that's going to be needed to manage provider expectations, patient expectations, to deal with exceptions, for example, non-Affordable Care Act compliant health plans. So we imagine starting with something that we can all have some consensus on. And we would like a little extra time just to kind of maybe massage HMSA's amendments. If there are projects that we can start sooner than a year because the pieces fall in place, we would not want a statutory barrier. So we acknowledge the need to kind of move in a deliberate fashion, but if there's, for example, consensus from the working group that we don't have to wait till July 1, 2025, that would be acceptable to us. But we certainly understand the reason why the people who are going to incur the expense of time and money and manpower want to make sure they're walking into this eyes wide open with as many variables under control as possible. But again, if something falls into place and we all agree, we would hope that we don't have to wait till July 1, 2025 to do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like if there are certain things that could be accelerated that's in the best interest of patients, we
Yes.
should try to do that.
Yes.
But I do understand the complexity of rolling something like this out.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Representative Kobayashi.
For Hawaii Association for Health Plans. It seems like the amendments that you're adding puts another hurdle, particularly on the service provider. Shall contact patient's health insurance or health plan that obtain from patient's primary care provider, make good faith efforts to transmit results of screening, et cetera. Is all of that necessary?
We do think so because, within the primary healthcare setting, we would still like the care team to coordinate with the provider.
Well, okay. I'll let it go.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's move on to Senate Bill 2345 relating to crisis intervention. Members, we have testimony in support from the Department of Health.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Department of Health strongly supports this bill with following comments as well. The MHEW program is a vital part of the crisis continuum. However, upon speaking with members of law enforcement, there are certain times where situations are so urgent and there are other circumstances like maybe in rural parts of some of the neighbor islands, there might not be cell phone reception. So we're in active discussions with law enforcement, and we're trying to get this dialogues with all of the different county police departments as to working out a process by which extremely urgent situations, which cannot wait even a minute or two, could be dealt with in a more timely, effective manner, which would still involve the MHEW process, but we're hoping that the officers have a little leeway to make sure the person is safe before having to try to contact MHEW. That's it. We're here for comments.
Thank you, Dr. Koyanagi. We have testimony from the Office of the Public Defender in support. A testimony in support from the Department of Law Enforcement.
Aloha, Chair Bellotti, Vice Chair Takanuuchi, members of the committee. My name is Mike Vincent. I'm a Deputy Director with the Department of Law Enforcement. We stand in strong support of the measure. We had a recommended amendment to the current draft, something that was left out of the other. We also note that a related or similar bill was heard Wednesday, Senate Bill 3139, and the amendments that you made to that bill kind of takes care of this bill as well, because there's pieces that needed to be meshed together. So either one is fine, but yeah, the law enforcement needs to be able to, when we have people in crisis, be able to get them to a behavioral health crisis center so that they can actually get the help that they need and put them in a setting where they can get the professionals and see the people that they need. Just to clarify that, the law enforcement is not looking to replace or make the judgments of the mental health emergency workers or the professionals, but creating a limited window where there's an opportunity for law enforcement to take the individuals and have them taken to the professionals, because MEHEWs are not always available to come down to a scene. And if they're on the phone asking questions, well, have you eaten today? How are you feeling today? Well, that doesn't quite always work out so well. But it just gives some opportunities for law enforcement to get these people to help. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Testimony via Zoom, Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Aloha Maika Cole, Chair Belani, Vice Chair Takeo Nucci, Grant Nakaya with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We stand on our written testimony in support.
Thank you. Testimony in support from Executive Office on Aging. Testimony in support from Disability and Communication Access Board. Testimony in support from State Council on Mental Health. In support, Institute for Human Services. In support, Hawaii Primary Care Association. In support, Alzheimer's Association. In support, SHOPO. AARP in support, Epilepsy Foundation, Hawaii Disability Rights Center, Opportunity Youth Action Hawaii, all in support. And then an individual in support. Any other late testimony, late testifiers in the room? Oh, go ahead. Oh, yes, Queens.
Hi, Chair. J.C. Mikey Lack on behalf of Queens Health System. Thanks. I apologize for the late testimony. We certainly appreciate the intent of this measure. We just want to call the committee's attention to the fact that as Department of Health indicated, the MHEW program has been quite successful. I know there was mention of delays and so forth in certain contexts, but we've gone back and looked at our data, and it's very rare that there are any kinds of delays in getting the appropriate response back when someone's in crisis. And to the previous testifier's point, I think until we have our additional behavioral health crisis centers in place, putting something into statute like this may be a little bit premature. So those comments and the ones we've submitted just take under consideration, and they apply to Senate Bill 3139 as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other testifiers via Zoom? All right, members, questions. I have some questions. Perhaps first for law enforcement.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you kind of like paint us a picture of what this crisis intervention training is going to look like, where you folks are kind of coordinating? What does it mechanically look like between state, DLE, and then the county?
Okay, so currently, all of the law enforcement agencies in the state have CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. It goes for a number of days. The sheriffs, for example, since 2016, 2017 have been doing it, and it's approximately a week long. The counties, each police department has theirs. There's a national organization that most of them use to get the training, and we were approached a while back about trying to find a way to actually make sure that across the state, everybody's kind of on the same page with respect to the law enforcement officers getting trained. Our plan was to, work with Department of Health, make sure that, and working with this national organization that actually does this training across the country, to make sure that the training that is going to the officers, and the officers, there's a couple different levels. The crisis intervention officers are the ones that actually have, lack of a better term, super training, that can come in and work a lot closer with somebody in crisis. Every officer gets some level of CIT, and they do their best to work with somebody in crisis, but there's sometimes, we need to get somebody here to deal with this. And the idea was to get some of these specially trained crisis intervention officers called on the scene, and there's always officers on duty somewhere. Get them to come to the scene and actually make the call, hey, you know what, we need to get this person to somebody that is able to help them and help them get the help they need. But the training, it's not it is nationally recognized, and it is, we're looking in this bill, the positions to actually bring in people, not necessarily law enforcement officers, but people from the behavioral health area to actually coordinate this for all the law enforcement agencies in the state, whether they're county or state.
Okay, so I guess, what does that training look like? Is it embedded within the new recruits? Is it all recruits? Is it annual training? What does that look like?
Yes.
Yeah, so tell me, like, what is that?
So I just got through going through the recruit class with the last graduating class, and it was actually a week plus. It came in right after domestic violence training, and there's a lot of classroom portions. There is actual scenario-based parts of it, with the annual in-service or recall training, where every officer has to come back for 40 hours of training. With this year, one day of it was actually dedicated to crisis intervention training, and the plan is for this coming year, at least 2 days, so that every officer gets CIT. Part of the CIT with the annual training actually involves use of force training and force on force. So I'm just going to give you, because I was helping them with that, and I was playing the individual in crisis. I came in the room, I got a gun on the table in front of me, and I'm screaming and yelling, and it was, how do they respond? Some officers do really well, trying to step back, calm down, and there are some that need to be some training in there. But the idea was actually put them in a situation where they're getting excited, and part of what I was doing was getting them excited. If you can get somebody elevated, both agitated and emotional, and it's easy when an officer comes in, they start barking orders, put the gun down, get away from it, and some officers, it's really easy to push their buttons and get them escalating up, while others, it's just, calm, but it's getting them to recognize, hey, this isn't your normal situation. Nobody was at risk. In our scenario, the gun was on the table, wasn't in my hand, but it was there. Now, if an officer is not safe and they've got a weapon in hand, things are a little different. But the idea was, what are you going to do to get them to settle down? And then throughout recruit class, when we had taser training, we had a number of scenarios going through, I don't know what that is, through taser training, and one of them was specifically for de-escalation. Scenario was somebody at a park with a machete threatening people. You arrive, and it was, when I went through it, it was, because I'd been doing this for months with the recall, I could, okay, let's work on some of these, and then they just ended it. Okay, and we're done? Yeah, that was all you needed to do, just start calming them down. And then other recruits, hey, they're zapping them. So it's getting the officers accustomed to, traditionally, cops are expected to come on scene and within a couple seconds evaluate what's happening, what they need to do with the individual. With CIT, the idea is, not every situation requires that. If you can be safe, stop. Take 30, 60, 100, take some time to see what's going on with the individual to kind of determine what is the appropriate response in working in that encounter. So those are kind of the things that go on in the training.
Is there anything in the training, right? Because there's that crisis training and how to manage a system. But then what you want to do is have this crisis training then empower you to make the decision of where to send a person once they've been,
Yes.
I guess, detained by law enforcement.
Right, and that's the reason for the crisis intervention officers, the specially trained ones, so they can come in and actually make that call instead of just a MHEW. And the problem we got is the MHEWs prior to this, the options to the officers, MHEWs called, either they're going to be taken to a mental health facility or they're going to be left alone. For the officer, it's either take them into custody or leave them on the street at that point. but you've got this wide range of
Okay,
other
and I-
people. And
so
so
I
these
guess-
CIOs are, the
Yeah.
idea is they would make that call.
What I'm trying to understand is that for the crisis intervention officer, who's going to be able to make that determination and that call, which is kind of a serious call to make,
Yes.
and not everyone can make that call.
That's right.
What is the training with respect to these issues of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, psychological, cognitive issues, substance disorder? What does that training look like? What does that specialized training look like?
That is, haven't had it, but from what I understand, it's more specialized to help recognize the symptoms, recognize the patterns of behavior, recognize the things that might be going on with the individual, and interact with them to kind of figure out what's going on and determine how best to get them some help. So it's a little more than just trying to have the encounter and de-escalate to a safe time, but actually make a determination. There's more to hear than this person, that they really need help. And it's a longer training. It's a week or more long.
Okay, and I thank you, members, for letting me indulge in this, because I think this is really important. I think this is a gap in our continuum of care that we need to beef up and understand. But I am sensitive to understanding how this plays out in real time, right? So let's do a scenario. Officer who's trained in de-escalation has the general crisis intervention training.
Correct.
Comes on a scene, secures the scene. You envision a second person coming on who has additional potential training, crisis intervention officer, who can come in and then make the call to say, okay, this person, we had to control them a little bit. They're not dangerous, but maybe they're an Alzheimer's patient and they just, I don't know what, or they have a, let's not do the Alzheimer's patients, let's do someone who's experiencing some kind of substance detox issue or something like that. Doesn't necessarily need to go to the emergency room. The person who's making that call, that training, that's where I'm really worried that, is there enough training? And I asked you in the last bill, is there an additional level of training within the national kind of options that has additional training?
And again, there is. Major Lambert's much better at knowing those differences than we are. Part of what you just talked about, we're currently working with our vendor on developing our dispatch system. And that's one of the things, is what trainings every officer has. So if dispatch gets a call, they can actually start sending people that have those skills. You need to go, just in case. Now, if once an officer puts hands on, somebody's going to get called anyway. But the idea with some of the de-escalation is get it to a point where you haven't had to put any hands on or control them other than with verbal instructions. Once we put hands on somebody, that's a whole, now you've got constitutional issues that are falling into play.
I have a little bit of experience with this in my other role, where we sometimes sue the police a lot. But I guess that's where, right, when you say you put hands on, at that point, does that person then have a potential criminal charge? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They may, but for whatever reason, we've now taken them into custody.
Okay.
And so it's a matter of now, what do we do with them?
Okay.
Do
And
we,
once you take them into custody, what are the options at that point?
once we take them into custody right now, they go, if an MHEW does not MH1 them, they go to lockup.
Okay. So that's kind of the area that we need to figure out to get you folks the proper training to then make, so here's another question. If you put hands on them and this law were in place, if you had the properly trained individuals, you could make, at that determination, could you make the determination to send them to BHCC and not to MH1 them?
Yes.
To Queens?
Yes, we have options.
And I think that's all I have my questions on, but I'm going to ask Dr. Koyanagi next. And I know he didn't even testify on this, but he's going to be here, I think. Dr. Koyanagi. And I do think, well, we could ask Dr. Fink to come up, because I think, Dr. Fink, you're on this. But I think I'll ask, because I think, so listening to this, right, and knowing that we opened up this first BHCC, right, let's fast forward to 3 years from now, can you see a situation where the law enforcement would be able to send someone that they've detained, put hands on, had custody, and send them to the BHCC?
Yes.
Okay. What is the training that they're going to need?
So the CIT program is a well-established national model for officers to engage people in behavioral health crisis. I believe most jurisdictions probably have a program similar to our MHEW program, which allows clinicians with several years of training to vet out cases that officers may come upon. My previous comments pertain to situations where situations are so urgent that there's already existing language in statute that says basically that officers do not need to wait for an MHEW consultation before putting hands on a actively suicidal patient. The previous comments are analogous to that as it relates to people who are subjects who may be at imminent risk of harming someone else. So our thinking was that the process that we would try to work out with law enforcement would be in cases in which even a minute delay in having to call MHEW would potentially lead to an adverse outcome, that law enforcement, upon coming upon a subject like that, would be able to put hands on and then call the MHEW worker. As far as the BHCC is concerned, the best practice for BHCCs as prescribed by SAMHSA is that BHCCs accept all law enforcement and first responder drop-off. So that's a separate issue from being a best practice on the receiving end is to take all drop-offs from first responders.
With that best practice in mind, and again, let's fast forward 5 years, right? We have a number of BHCCs in place. The concept then would be that law enforcement can divert first to BHCC, and then at the BHCC, they can then make a determination if they need to then, because there might be a MHEW on site at the BHCC that could then say, okay, this person is too high acuity, we need to send them to the emergency room. And that's where that call could then be made.
Typically, there would not be a MHEW per se worker at the BHCC. It would be the contracted BHCC in-house staff that would decide if a person was too acute to remain at the BHCC and would require immediate transfer to a acute psychiatric facility.
Is our current BHCC system set up so that we could do that now, or are we moving towards doing that?
We're moving towards that because of our soft opening and need for further construction and licensure.
Okay. So again, in concept, the thing is, the idea is like 5 years from now, if we have more BHCCs, then what DLE is requesting is more feasible. I mean, and in the ideal world, that is the system we want. We want law enforcement to first go to BHCCs and then potentially, if they need higher levels of care, then to emergency rooms versus going to the emergency rooms first.
Yes, but again, going forward 5 years, I think in an ideal world, there should still be some type of MHEW program in place for the vast majority of the cases that are not so urgent that MHEW worker with several years of experience can vet out whether a person really needs to be taken out of their home and brought involuntarily to a BHCC or acute ER.
Okay. Let me ask the question another way. So I understand the current BHCC, right, is supposed to be taking people who voluntarily come there and may be suicidal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but why wouldn't we want a situation where law enforcement is actively like talking someone from walking off the ledge to have the ability to send that person, because once they detain them, they're not suffering any kind of acute, like a bone is not broken or something. Why shouldn't they go to the BHCC now? Because they are suicidal and the BHCC is supposed to be taking folks who are suicidal.
So I think we're maybe talking about two related but slightly separate issues. So as far as the BHCC, BHCC is concerned about not so much about how a patient got there, but once they're there, BHCC staff is going to do whatever they can do to help that person out of their crisis. The other issue is the decision tree in the field where we're talking about whether law enforcement in common circumstances should vet the involuntary transport with an MHEW or not. And I think our position is that the MHEW program is a valuable part of the continuum and vetting out whether patients should be brought involuntarily to our BHCC.
Okay, all right, thank you. These are granular questions, I know, but I think this is helping to understand how we might phase in the ability of crisis intervention officers to fit into a program where we have more behavioral health centers available. And I think that's one of the concerns I have. Because it's this training and the ability to make calls about really kind of medical diagnoses in the field, which is what you folks are concerned about, as I understand it. Okay. Members, any other questions? Go ahead.
Maybe for Department of Law Enforcement, I'm not sure. Sorry, just for my background information. So when we talk about these crisis intervention officers, and I see the part about, getting certified in one of the national programs.
Right.
So when people go to these programs, are they typically just officers from the departments, or are they people who have some kind of additional degree or background, typically in social work or psychology, who are then getting, and the law enforcement background, who are getting this training, or could I just go and?
Typically, they will come here to do the training. And it's the officers that are getting trained from the professionals.
So it's just the officers, there's no other background requirement for the officers to get this certification?
I mean, we have officers, and we had an officer 2 days ago defended his doctoral dissertation in psychiatry. He's downstairs. One of the training officers actually is a MSW. So that there are some with that background already, and those are people that we would grab to stick in the training just because they've already got some of this. Initially, I believe it was the initial version of the bill, unless it was one that we were talked about before. There's a large working group in this area, but we were trying to have Department of Health actually put the stamp of approval on the certification. And we think that's the best way, because then they know the training that the officers are getting to be the CIOs meets their standards. And these are, even the CIOs, we're not expecting them to make a diagnosis, just recognizing, hey, something is serious enough, we need to get them to someone who can make the diagnosis. And a lot of this is being driven by court decisions and legislation. I mean, there was an act last year that is now requiring de-escalation training. Everybody's doing it, but it's needed. But it's just kind of driving these things.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and sorry, I know SHOPO submitted testimony support, but the county police departments are also on board there.
Major Lambert called me last night. He submitted testimony late. They're in support of this. Major Lambert, he's kind of the expert on the law enforcement side of all of this area, and he's been working very closely. He works very closely with the other counties' police departments. It's kind of how we got involved. It was, rather than have a county law enforcement agency, it should be the state, and that's how we got involved. And yeah, we want to support this.
And then, sorry, one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's
Chair.
great. Thank you. Ask lots of questions.
And sorry, so the amount, I think you said $500,000 for the positions?
Yes.
So is that going to be, like 500,000 to get the people in and then get them the training, the national certified trainer, to come down and get the training, and then they'll just be part of what's the recurring
The
cost?
500,000 is the recurring, and then that second number
Okay.
is actually bringing the people in to do their part. That's what the cost that we got that from Major Lambert. The 500,000, like I said, we are looking at not necessarily law enforcement, but actual people in the field coming in to manage this program.
So the 500,000 is just
for-
3 positions?
It's for the staff that will be coordinating the training statewide.
Okay. Okay.
I have a follow-up on that. So the 163 is for the national trainers.
Yes, ma'am.
And then,
And pushing it out to the counties as well.
okay. And then in terms of like any county funds for this, I guess they would be paying for the officers and their time during the
Correct.
training. Okay.
And
So
then-
that
and the-
doesn't,
And we're not looking to take over the county police department's training, it's just coordinating and make sure we're all on the same page with what's being trained at the 2 different levels. The CIOs would probably come through our program, but all the regular officer training would be at the department levels.
okay, got it. How many CIOs are you hoping to train with this kind of appropriation? Across and all the counties, right?
As many as we can. I forget the number that HPD has. HPD has a number of these
Okay,
people that are already in this category.
okay. And then I know you don't have the answer to this, but because this bill does move forward, if you can get the information about if there's additional specialized training above the 40 hours a week for the annual in-service, that would be very helpful. Okay?
So the in-service, the whole week is 40 hours, and there's multiple subjects. So like in this year, we're looking at 2 days for the CIT. So it wouldn't be 40 hours. So it's 40 hours or more for your CIOs.
Okay,
And I know the recruits get, like, we got a week plus of it. Like I said, it was tied to the domestic violence the week before, and then other ugly stuff before that, so.
okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Does every officer in every county receive CIO training? Is this like a standard?
CIT, Crisis
CIT,
Intervention
yes,
Training.
thank
I
you.
believe
Sorry.
they do. I believe that now it is, every academy is doing it. I don't know the extent of how much training the county department, I can just speak to what we do with our officers. I know the county PDs, some of them call it mental health first aid, but everybody is getting it. There's been court decisions that have been requiring this for some time. Then after last year's act, can't remember the number, 168, something like that, you're going to see more of it and more of an emphasis on it from law enforcement. Law enforcement is always evolving in how we work with the community, and trying to develop a kinder, friendlier face on the uniform.
Thank you.
Thank you, great questions. Thank you for being on the hot seat.
No problem, thank you.
All right, moving to Senate Bill 2992. This is our mental health code review bill, members. First up, we have testimony and support from Department of Health.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. My name is Courtney Matsu. We stand in support of the intent of the bill. We are working together with the Department of AGs to look at a way for us to do regular reviews, and then we commit to submitting proposed amendments based on those reviews to the legislature every session. Thank you.
Thank you. We have testimony and support from Disability and Communication Access Board. Testimony, comments, Queens Health Systems. Testimony and support, Hawaii Health Systems Corporation. Testimony in support from individual John Chacos. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm in support of this bill. I'm just a concerned citizen. I think that creating a committee on this is a great idea. When I was very young, my mom went back to school and became a therapist, and I think I had a firsthand upbringing around a lot of, different issues in mental health. She used to come home and talk about all these different, problems and things that would come up, and I think a lot of people don't get that same understanding of what it means to have, people in power doing things about these, these issues, because they don't necessarily understand the significance of them. So what I think the best thing you guys can do is open up that committee, start, the conversation, because the more people talk about this and the more people understand the issues, actually realize they're more than just maybe something in your mind, which some people still believe it's just, it's just this or that, you know what I mean? Then we have a better opportunity for tackling issues like homelessness and, keeping people working, healthy, and capable of sustaining themselves. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I testify in support of this.
Thank you for coming in and testifying in person. We have testimony in support from HHSC. Testimony, late testimony from Maui Chamber of Commerce in support. Any other late testifiers in the room, on Zoom? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Seeing none. Dr. Matsu. So I appreciate the kind of cryptic testimony. Is the sense that you folks could provide an update next year?
Yes.
Okay. And the Attorney General is willing to work on this?
We've already spoken with Ann Lopez.
So can we name her in this? Or would she rather, I guess, we could, it's not clear to me. Does she want to be named in this, or?
I could go back to her and ask.
She is on the committee. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Okay, we will recess. Again, we will do decision-making at 11:30 a.m. If there should be additional amendments or suggested language for the bill on public standing orders, again, we will be doing decision-making at 11:30 a.m. We are in recess. Reconvening our Committee on Health and Homelessness. Today is Friday, March 15, 2024, 11:30 a.m. in Conference Room 329. We are reconvening our 9 o'clock a.m. hearing for decision-making. So first up is Senate Bill 2529. Members, Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Pass this as is. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 2529, SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Amato?
Aye.
Representative Iligan?
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi?
Aye.
Representative Martin?
Aye.
Representative Nishimoto is excused. Representative Garcia?
Aye.
Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to Senate Bill 3122 relating to public health standing orders. Members, good conversation here about this bill. We will take up the amendments in Aloha Care, and then with these following amendments that DOH has presented to us, which includes establishing the Public Health Standing Orders Working Group under the Department of Health, and that the Public Health Standings Orders Working Group shall provide advice and recommendations to the Department of Health for the implementation of this act. This will allow essentially kind of rolling implementation as the working group comes to some agreements. Members, questions, comments, or concerns? And let me just clarify to make sure the effective date shall take effect on July 1st, 2024, and shall be repealed on June 30th, 2027, as well as any tech amendments. Hold on, let me back that up. We'll do it shall take effect on July 1. We'll make it a defective effective date of 3,000 and shall be repealed on June 30th, 2027. Okay, so the defective date is going to be the July 1st, 3,000. Any tech amendments identified by HMSO? Comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 3122, SD1, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments, noting the presence of Representative Nishimoto. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. Chair's recommendation for 2345 is to create an HD1. Members, we have a similar bill moving, but what I want to do is preserve this bill just to focus on crisis intervention training. So we're going to amend this to keep the training, but striking out the definitions of a crisis intervention officer. And the crisis intervention training shall be that the department may coordinate crisis intervention training for state and county law enforcement agencies. Crisis intervention training shall emphasize training regarding individuals in crisis or suffering from some form of impairment, whether from dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or any physical, developmental, cognitive, psychological, or substance disorder influencing their behavior. The department and county law enforcement agencies, in consultation with stakeholders, shall identify one or more nationally recognized crisis intervention organizations able to provide training and certification for officers. In the funding sections, members, we will keep the Section 6 and Section 7 in the funding sections that are in SD2. Any tech amendments identified by HMSO and a defective date? Questions, comments, or concerns? Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 2345, SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. All members present. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
Chair's recommendation on SB 2992 is to say beginning July 1st, 2025. Oh, it is. No, we'll change the date in Senate Bill 2992 to say beginning July 1st, 2024. Department of Health and AG's office has indicated that they are ready to proceed on this, and then we will put in a defective date. Members, questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 2992, SD2, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. All members present. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
We are adjourned, members. Have a great weekend.